Don Streisik. He's coming home. He's a Marine coming home from Afghanistan. So on behalf of the school district and the board, we'd like to commend Don and thank him for serving our country. Otters, and Otters thank you to Alan Keller, Michelle Colas, and Dan Morello. The Otters recently the Otters for a very long time, long before Pam or myself got here, was the swim club and feeder program for the Riverside Brookfield High School swim team. And over the last few years, there was decisions made to not break up, but to go to a different direction with a new swim club, and the Otters agreed with it. It was getting tough to manage and getting parents to volunteer. So we now are part of, our swim program is now part of the Bullets, and the Otters have been very good to Riverside Brookfield High School. And recently they closed out their books and made approximately a little over $10,000 donation to Riverside Brookfield High School. Some of that money was broken out in 2 checks. A small portion, a few $1,000s, was donated to the swim program so that they can get an underwater camera to film swimmer strokes while they were working on their technique. And then the rest of the money was donated to the district. I did talk with Mr. Keller and explain to him that under board policy he can make a suggestion of how they would want it to be used, but ultimately it's the board and the district's decision. He understood that. He just asked that it be used for something in the natatorium, whether that goes towards the repairs that are going on with some of the repairs that are taking place right now, or new bleachers or new equipment. But I just wanted to take a moment to thank the Otters for all their years of service and kindness and generosity to the school district. Another point of interest, just briefly, Pam and I met yesterday with the PTO, and they had a nice turnout, and we started off the school year. We thanked everybody for participating. They're finalizing some reports that they need to do with the IRS in regards to their 501c3 status, but they're working with now the same accountant that both the foundation and Booster Club are working with, so they're in the process of rectifying some of their reporting from some previous years to keep their status active as a 501c3. So they're rectifying that. I just wanted to update the board. Pam's been doing a good job working with them as a liaison, and they've been keeping me in the loop as well. And the last thing is, if anybody didn't know, we did receive a letter from the Capital Development Board acknowledging, and Governor Quinn acknowledging, that the district will be receiving the Capital Development Board school construction grant that they applied for back in 2002-2003, and that will be approximately $8.9 million since our project is completed. The district is free to use that as they wish. There's a couple things that we will need to discuss briefly tonight. I just want to provide us some brief updates to the board, but we did receive the agreement letter and some specific instructions that Tim and I are working on. I would anticipate it's going to take us a couple weeks to get all the information that they need pulled together. Then once we send it back to them, they said it could take 30 to 60 days. So I would say we'll probably end up receiving this money before the first of the year or shortly thereafter. That being said, we are currently working with our architect. We met as a facilities council last week and reviewed the second draft of the life safety report and the facilities assessment plan. And there are at least $4.5 to $5 million worth of work that we know need to be done to the facility within the next few years in regards for life safety issues and for roofs and some other issues. So that's already some of the money that would be a good allocation to use in some of the $8.9 million for that. Ultimately, that's the board's decision. I know some people have sent in emails asking various questions. A few emails from community members were about paying off the debt early. I did talk with Liz Hennessy, our bond counsel from, the name's escaping me right now, William Blair. And our renovation bonds that were taken out are not callable till 2015, so she advised that it would not be a good idea to use the money for some of that, that it would be better for us to keep that in a working cash fund and gain some minimal interest. Our working cash bonds of the $5 million do come off the books. Our last payment is in December, as Tim mentioned, during the budget hearing, so taxpayers should see some tax relief, minor tax relief, in their spring tax bill. Tonight you'll hear, for the next 2 months, we'll be doing some progress monitoring and reporting to the board on the district goals. Tonight you'll hear about our technology plan, which is a district goal. And that's also something that some of that $8.9 million can be used for to help us with the technology plan. We also have some things that we can consider using some of that money for to help us with initiatives and interventions in regards to the classroom as we continue to work in math, science, and English to address our ACT goals and the board's goals. So I think as it gets closer to the district receiving the $8.9 million, I think there'll be some opportunities for the board, if they so choose, or unless they want to identify a different time during upcoming COW meetings where we can get into some deep discussions and discuss how and when and what we would like to do with the $8.9 million. I can tell you that Tim and I get emails on a regular basis from people suggesting on ideas they have on how to use the money, but there are a lot of things, and what I think we should do is, and I'm sure the board's already thinking about this, is figuring out a way that we can best stretch out that $8.9 million so that we can address needs of the districts for the next several years, and hopefully avoid having to go out to the taxpayers and put burden back on them. So it's something to think about, and I would open for a brief discussion if the board would like to talk about this briefly or counter into anything I've said.
Any?
I just think there's a certain irony to the retirement of the working cash bonds and the timing of it. That's all I'm going to say.
Anybody else?
What is it, I mean, are you going to discuss the alternatives for the $8.9 million at the Finance Council? And then
Yes,
present some
we have not convened the
ideas?
Finance Council, and what I would think we would do probably closer to November, once we start getting an idea from our new architect about the life safety report and facilities report.
But- 'cause
We
it-
can kind of mirror them two together.
I think the significant thing is that we are able to show to the community that we've considered the different alternatives, like whether we should retire bonds, that we have the needs that, you know, we've seen, some of us have seen the preliminary report for the work that needs to be done, and we have to keep, you know, everybody reads the paper. There was an op-ed about how could there be work to be done on the school when we just spent this $60 million or whatever they inflated it to, you know, 6 or 7 years ago. And, you know, basically, like, everybody who owns property, whatever we didn't fix then is 7 years older than it was then, which the stadium makes it, what, 50, 60 years old as a for instance. So I think if we marry the timing of the life safety and the other, what do we call the whole study? Because it's broader than just a life safety. It's
Facilities
Facility.
assessment.
the facilities assessment, that there's certain portions that will probably be required where we'd have to fund them one way or the other. Under the law, we'd have to issue bonds without a taxpayer referendum or come up with the money some other way. So if we marry the idea that we're having the facilities study and that we considered retiring the bonds, paying for the life safety, paying for future needs of the school, things that have been deferred, you know, the technology that we're going to talk about today, I just think we have to show that we, you know, made a calculated and educated analysis of here's what our needs are and here's what the money we have, and that we can communicate that to the community. And some people are going to be happy and some aren't, and
Sure.
most are going to be in the middle probably.
I think if the board remembers, I mean, last spring, we were sitting here with, we were up in 201, but we were getting an in-depth analysis from William Blair on whether or not it was a good idea to go out for life safety bonds.
Right.
To do some of the work to the tennis courts and to the stadium and to the roofs and things we needed to do. we elected to slow that process down, and I think that was a good decision by the board. Because we were considering increasing tax burden, and this 8.9 million came up at the right time. The board will have access to the life safety survey. My facilities council and I went through it with the architect. We're probably thinking in October or November. We don't want to cloud up the meetings too much as we're reporting out on school data and student progress and test scores. But if you look at a life safety survey, which is required by the state every 10 years, just in roofing alone over the next 10 years, we could probably eat up most, if not all, of that money. I mean, John and Tim, I will defer to you. That's the way I was told. But I mean, basically, by the life cycle of the roofs, you know, there's sections of roof that were either not addressed or only addressed with a one-ply membrane that eventually will be in the need to be replaced over the next 10 years. So there's always stuff that's going to need repairs here. So
Maybe we could also consider having a nice public forum. I remember when we first went for the referendum, we had a nice forum, couple forums in the alumni hall. We could have coffee and just have people who are knowledgeable, like Joel, come to answer questions, and committee members, not community members, can come in and just learn about the school. It's unfortunate that we have these forums when we need to fix something or we need to have money. We probably should do an annual kind of state of the building. Let's review it so that when it's in ill repair, it's not a surprise to anybody. This is what we do with our homes. We probably should do that with our one major asset of the community. And we could go through that whole list. Hopefully you're compiling this whole list that comes in the emails, and just go through all these things, and then the hardest task might be to prioritize them.
sure. And we discussed already briefly that, and that's the good thing about using the format that we use with the advisory councils, that to go through that facilities assessment plan and the life safety survey would probably be too long of a meeting to do that at a public meeting, but maybe we have the architect come, do a summary to the board, and then from there, do another public facilities committee, so that anybody from the board and anybody from the community that wanted to come and hear the analysis and breakdown of the status of our facilities and the future upkeep needs can not only hear that, but also at that time answer or ask questions.
Are we approaching the life safety as if we did not have the 8.9? In the
Yes.
case of what the options of what we're going to have to replace things with?
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to get carried away here that now that we have it in the right pocket, we need to spend it.
Right.
Well, the way
But we
that-
also
Secondly, have we looked at the concept of not doing a full levy if we want to give the money back?
We have not.
So there's other options that I think we really need to flush out
Sure.
and discuss publicly and try to get a sense of where we.
And I would probably suggest we'll do like what Mr. Walsh was talking about, is that that's something that the Finance Advisory Council should get with Tim and I and try to hash through some of that, so when we do come out in front of the public, we can try to answer as many of those questions as possible. One thing I will tell you, just from what you said there, and I would hope the board members interpret this the same way, is that we got a lot done from the 66 million that was spent in 2006. But the one thing that the architect is identifying is that sometimes to get that much done, if you start doing, I'm trying to remember the term, bargain budgeting, it doesn't do us any good if we build a stadium and that in 3 years it's going to need to be $500,000 of repair. Or if the track's already going to be peeling up right at its 7th year, you're trying to get years past the warranty, not just building up to the life expectancy. So we also want to make sure what we do is we do it right. And one big ticket item that's in there is something that I know we've been addressing for the 3 years that I've been here, is some additional flood control and some things to address, so that every time we get a significant flood, that we have some back check valves in our basements and some additional drainage underneath the stadium, so that the turf isn't floating away every time we get a heavy rain. And some of those items, in order to do that, will we'll have to make sure we spend the right amount of money, but it's stuff that's, if that's our only home field that we have for soccer, track, football, I mean, that thing's being used all the time. We want to make sure we do it the right way.
Any other questions, comments?
Was there any documents, memorandums, or any written materials when you took over that the grant was pending?
Not to my knowledge. Within my first 2 or 3 months on the job, that's when I received a phone call from the Capital Development Board, and then Mary Ann was able to go through some of her archive files. And we had Eileen Pusateri look through the business office files, and we were able to recover some of the original grant applications.
And was there any document that the board at that time contemplated, let's say, for example, if we get this grant, it's probably gonna be a timeout where they may earmark it to do the roof, and that's why they didn't do the roof as part of the construction? Or was there any type of document that addressed what the board intended might be the future use of that money?
The grant application was pretty specific in that it specifically laid out the intention for filing for the grant was to do internal and external building renovations and repairs to a facility that was close to 100 years old.
That grant, I was on the board then. We went for that grant because we were unsure that we would ever pass a referendum.
Okay, so the grant was a capital grant in nature.
It was for those classrooms.
Okay, and so that we spent that money. So one of the theories is that money being capital money should go to replace the money we spent. Is that what the board thought back then?
Well, when we
Wasn't
had.
it even earlier on?
Yeah.
Even
2002,
prior to the
2002.
the whole big program, right?
Yes,
Yes.
right. It was very early.
Because it was like 2000, I want to say 2001 or 2002.
2-3.
It was
And that wasn't
early.
even, the big 60 million wasn't even contemplated at that point. was it?
No.
No.
The whole heating and cooling and plumbing and the pinholes and the walls and none of that had been identified yet.
Right. And with the slowness of the state, things had to get done here, and the bigger project came about.
Right.
And
And-
that was a whole different,
And always during those early years, there's always hope there'd be money left to fix the stadium. And, that, you can only go so far with everything that had to be repaired. I mean, there was always hope there'd be more, like, we did a lot with that money, we really did, it stretched very far, we got nice savings, they bought the metal products early and saved money, many cost savings along the line, but there was always more on the list that we couldn't get to. Just like Tim says, there's things that, roofs that didn't get fixed, the stadium didn't get fixed.
But that list never talked about the 8.9 million in the pipeline.
I forgot about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so there'll be more discussions on this as we go through it.
Correct.
All right, any more reports from you?